Jacob Heilbrunn, and welcome to yet another unexpected installment of In the National Interest. Harry Kazianis notified me as soon as he heard the momentous news that Senator Mitch McConnell is stepping down as leader of the Republican caucus. And we thought that this news deserved a special episode. So, Harry, welcome aboard. And I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts? What does this mean for the GOP?
Hey, Jacob, good to be back. Didn't expect to be back so soon, but here we are. I'm not surprised, to be honest with you. I thought Mitch McConnell was probably going to retire a lot sooner than this, so it's not entirely unexpected from where I sit. Talking to different GOP insiders over the last couple of weeks, I think this was sort of expected. It's just the timing really wasn't sort of nailed down. But you know, Mitch McConnell is sort of one of these fixtures of the old guard GOP that are all going to disappear in the months and years to come. You know, like we talked about in the last installment of this podcast, at least in my view, the GOP is now dominated by Trump-era MAGA populists, not conservatives, but populists, which have completely different agenda sets, ideology, goals, policy and policymakers that would drive that, agenda forward if Trump were to come into office. So this is one of the last of the Mitt Romneys, if you will, of the I would say moderate Republicans that dominated the GOP from, when I was in college back in the 1990s into the present. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this, Jacob. I think as the years go on, a lot of these sort of 1990s, early 2000 Republicans, like, that had associations with like the Mitt Romneys or the Cheneys or the Bushes, they're all going to start disappearing from the landscape, entirely transforming the Republican Party, into this Trump era MAGA party it's not the same GOP that it was 20 years ago. That's for sure. I mean, when I was growing up, I was, the GOP that I remember was the Bill Bennetts and the Rick Santorums and things like that. Now it's a different bastion of people. It's the Steve Bannon sort of populists, the Peter Navarro sort of populists that have sort of changed out the GOP lineup, if you will. It's a very different world.
What does it mean for House Speaker Mike Johnson? Doesn't this strengthen his hand in resisting aid to Ukraine?
It's tough to tell, Jacob, where the tea leaves are going to go on that. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Nobody in the GOP has a good consensus of who they want as speaker. I don't think there's a consensus viewpoint just yet on what to do with Ukraine aid. I think there's a lot of neoconservative Republicans like the Elsie Stefanik's and others, who want to be supportive of Ukraine aid and probably would do it if there wasn't sort of the MAGA constraints about, issues with the border and things like that. So poor Mike Johnson has this very delicate balancing act he's got to try to figure out. On the one hand, he doesn't want to be deposed as speaker by, being too forthright on Ukraine aid. But at the same time, I think he understands that, we can't let Ukraine fall apart either. I mean, we can argue about the goals of what we should be doing with Ukraine and, what the strategy should be and if there should be a peace settlement. But I think it's obviously in America's interest to not allow Ukraine's territory to get cleaved off even more and more from the Russians or see that state get weakened anymore. So it's going to be a mixed bag, and it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks to see what happens. That's for sure.
What about McConnell's legacy? Has he constructed a conservative movement and now inadvertently handed it over to Trump? McConnell wanted this Supreme Court that is very pro-business. It has become Trumpified somewhat by some of the nominations that Trump made. Is McConnell's legacy, in a way, not the one he wanted, but it's going to be a much more radical Republican Party than he ever envisioned?
I think the question is, Jacob, it's even broader question. You bring Mitch McConnell in it. What does the Republican Party really want to be about? What is the core ideology? And I feel Mitch McConnell is sort of like this perfect example of your standard 1990s, 2000s center-right Republicans trying to figure out where they belong in a universe where Donald Trump has brought in, tens of millions of populist voters that are angry about a whole set of issues that that 1990s, 2000 GOP just didn't give a hoot about, to be honest with you. They just didn't, or didn't fight about in a way that those populist voters that are now in the party care about. And I think Mitch McConnell is sort of stuck in this place. I mean, think about it this way, Jacob. Mitch McConnell was able to sit down with Joe Biden and, if you recall, construct a budget deal. I think it's almost 10 years ago now, where it basically saved the country from default. And, a lot of populist Republicans considered that, capitulation. It's we're giving away the country, if you will. We're not getting everything we want. That's kind of sad. I think we need, I'm a conservative. I'm certainly, in that mindset, but I do realize that there does need to be compromise. We're a democracy, and I feel like a lot of those, in sort of the MAGA circles, see compromise as weakness, and that's not how the American system of government actually works, to be honest with you. So I think McConnell's sort of stuck in that, where compromise is a bad thing, deal making is a bad thing, and the country will suffer for that. The harder right, the harder radical populist, if you will, the Republican Party goes, I think it's going to create some challenges for him as the years go on, because obviously Donald Trump's not going to be around forever. I mean, he's got 2 effective years in office if he wins in 2024, and then who knows what happens. So,
final question, since this is Washington, who's going to replace McConnell?
Oh, God.
John Thune?
Jacob, I have to tell you, you would probably be able to answer this question better than me, because it has to be somebody who can make the MAGA base happy, has to be somebody who can get Donald Trump's support and get that endorsement. And then it has to be somebody who can still talk to the old guard. I'm going to throw a flyer out here and say it's Lindsey Graham. And I know people are going to say maybe he doesn't have the necessary leadership skills. Maybe he panders too much to Trump. I will tell you, Lindsey Graham is really good at sticking his finger in the wind and knowing where the direction of the party's going. Now, maybe he didn't know that right away in 2016 when he tried to run for president, but he does understand the power of Trump, the power of MAGA. He's been one of these neocons who's able to sort of shape-shift themselves into like a Trump populist. And I think he would be able to talk to sort of both sides. That's kind of who you need in that leadership role. And maybe he could do it.
I'll give you my bottom line, Harry. I think Mitch McConnell is going out with a whimper, not a bang. Harry, thank you for joining me again. This was a special emergency broadcast of In the National Interest. Harry and I will be back next week to watch the fallout.
Thanks, Jacob.